Right, now, on Wednesday, Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan reaffirmed government's commitment to the National Development Plan as he presented what was perhaps the biggest economic story of the week, the midterm budget policy statement. Here to unpack the budget and other business stories of the week is Ilke Van Zyl, an economist from Vunani Securities. Good to have you, Ilke. Welcome to Morning Live.
Morning, Leanne.
All right, let's talk about this medium-term budget policy. Did it meet your expectations? Any surprises there?
Not many surprises. On the first glance, it was a very encouraging budget in the context of South Africa's slowing growth environment. So we saw when the finance minister announced that the deficit will be 4.2% of GDP as opposed to the 4.6% they estimated in February, we had bond prices and the rand strengthening. But glancing at the outer years, because when they announced the medium-term budget policy speech, they estimate forecasts for 3 years into the future. So sort of saying, what are we going to do for the next 3 years? And for both of the subsequent two, the deficit actually widened, and we're now going to take a year longer to get that budget deficit down to the so-called acceptable 3% level of GDP. So I was very pleased at the beginning, but as I started to analyze the figures, I realized that we're once again slipping, we're once again spending too much. And the most worrying thing is the budget deficit in this current fiscal year, 144 billion worth of shortfall, 106 billion due to interest rates costs.
Wow.
So because we borrowed so much before, since 2009 and the downturn, we're now paying much more than half of that shortfall just to service that debt. And that's not good for anyone.
No, it's not. But where does it leave us as the consumer? How are we going to be paying extra and struggling for this?
Well, currently we're almost punishing government because the income shortfall, i.e. the revenue intake, is not meeting government's expectations, and because the VAT portion of their revenue is disappointing. Why? Because consumers aren't spending as they used to in the prior 3 years. And it's because the consumer is weak currently. Last year we had a nice running in credit at least, so we had some good performance in VAT intake, but currently credit growth is slowing, and the consumer, while no new tax measures were announced in this budget, we do expect new tax measures to come on board, say, next year, October, to finance these expansionary fiscal policies, such as the NHI, the National Health Insurance Plan, coming on board soon.
Yeah. Let's have a look at the currency. And do you think the measures to support the currency are good for the economy?
Well, the government sort of supports the currency from the point of view where they have capital or exchange controls. So they tell us we are not allowed to take money out of the country and say in excess of 4 million when you are an investor. So it's a very good measure when we are in turbulent times. So in 2009, when the world was in a crisis, South Africans were sort of reined back and say, don't take your money out, and investors as well. So the rand didn't get hurt that much. It still got hurt, but not that much than before. But currently, and when the rand strengthens and investors buy into our currency, we are not allowed to buy currencies abroad. So the market is it's not at a neutral state, so it's almost imbalanced. And that's why, from a long-term perspective, I would say those measures are futile, and we should rather just open up our exchange rate markets and see where the true value for the rand is.
That would be interesting to see.
Exactly.
And we've seen it strengthen this week slightly.
We did, and and it clearly shows how very dependent we are on global movements. We had the announcement by the Fed on the 18th of September, the US Federal Reserve, saying that they will not roll back their quantitative easing program as expected during the month of September. So what does that do? It provides more dollar liquidity into the system, and therefore the rand strengthens. And with the US government lockdown for the better part of 3 weeks, that sort of just pushed out those expectations even more. And so you are seeing emerging market currencies favorably influenced due to those almost turbulence in the US, if we would like to call
No doubt. Just finally, inflation figures for September released this week. What did you make of them?
Well, we had the 6.4% year-on-year in the month of August, and that was the highest in 4 years. So it subsided slightly to the 6% year-on-year level in September, but still sitting at that upper limit of the Reserve Bank's target band. So when we think of interest rates and where they might go in the future, the direction will most probably be up, because 6%, with the Reserve Bank targeting inflation between 3 and 6% is still rather high.
Yeah.
And when you look at the underlying pressures within the inflation basket, you're seeing rand pressure coming through, with the rand depreciating 20% year on year for the better part of 18 months now. It is starting to have a big effect on inflation. Secondly, labour costs. We're also seeing those pressures coming through, and then regulated prices, or the so-called administered prices within the CPI basket. So government tells us what the petrol price should be, what the energy prices should be, and those are currently sitting at 8.9% year on year. So we are not too favourable on the inflation outlook, thinking it will remain at 6% for around until next year, June. And then probably taper down. But that's not good news for a consumer who's already struggling.
And is about to struggle even more. But we will not talk about e-tolls. This morning we're going to not talk about that. Let's not, all right? We'll keep this one away from there. Thank you for talking to us.
It's a pleasure.
Ilke Van Zyl, economist, just unpacking what happened this week, medium-term budget, the currency, inflation figures, you name it. This was a busy week on the business front. All right, let's get you some sports news now.